Sofia Romano's feet were screaming by hour 7. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel glittered with enough crystal and gold leaf to fund a small country, and she'd been weaving between tables since 2 in the afternoon, serving champagne and canapés to women whose jewelry could pay her rent for a decade. The Metropolitan Ladies' Auxiliary Spring Luncheon. 300 of Manhattan's wealthiest women gathered to discuss charity work while drinking wine that cost more per bottle than Sofia made in a week. She didn't mind the work. Honest labor had never bothered her. What bothered her was the invisibility, the way these women looked through her like she was part of the furniture, their perfectly manicured hands snapping fingers when they wanted refills. Never a please, never a thank you. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. She'd been working double shifts for 3 months now, ever since her younger brother Miguel had been accepted to Columbia University. Full scholarship for academics, but living expenses in New York City were brutal. Their mother had worked herself into an early grave paying for Sofia's nursing degree, and Sofia was determined Miguel wouldn't sacrifice his dreams because of money. So she picked up extra catering shifts on top of her hospital work, translating exhaustion into tuition payments and grocery money. The ballroom was decorated in shades of cream and gold, enormous floral arrangements on every table releasing the cloying scent of lilies and roses. A string quartet played something classical and forgettable in the corner. The women themselves were a sea of pastel designer suits and statement necklaces, their conversation a constant hum of gossip and performative concern about various charitable causes. Table 12 was the worst. Sofia had identified them within the first hour, the way predators recognize each other. 4 women in their late 40s, all of them surgically maintained, expensively dressed, and radiating the particular cruelty that came from too much money and too little purpose. The ringleader was Vanessa Whitmore, blonde hair in a severe chignon, wearing a cream Chanel suit that probably cost $15,000. Her friends orbited around her like planets around a sun. Caroline Chen, in head-to-toe Valentino, Jessica Hartwell dripping in diamonds, and Patricia Ashford, whose family name was plastered on half the buildings in Connecticut. Sofia had served their table 6 times already, and each interaction left her feeling smaller. The way Vanessa's eyes would flick over her dismissively, the way Caroline would interrupt her mid-sentence to talk over her to her friends, and the way Jessica had sent back 3 different wine selections because none of them were adequate. It was Patricia who started it. Sofia was refilling water glasses, moving efficiently around the table, when Patricia's phone buzzed. She picked it up, and her perfectly Botoxed face arranged itself into an expression of theatrical shock. "Oh my God," Patricia said loudly enough to draw attention from neighboring tables. "Bethany's daughter is getting married. To a construction worker. Can you imagine?" The other women erupted in exaggerated gasps and titters. "A construction worker?" Vanessa's voice dripped with disdain. "What is she, 25? She could have had anyone. Bethany must be mortified. Probably has a beer gut and drives a pickup truck," Caroline added, and they all laughed like this was the height of comedy. Sofia's hand tightened on the water pitcher. Her husband Marco worked in construction, or that's what she'd been told when they met 3 years ago. Import and export with some construction interests, he'd said, which she'd later learned meant he owned half the concrete suppliers in New York and had his hands in every major development project in the city. She'd known from the beginning there was more to it, the way men in expensive suits deferred to him, the security that followed him everywhere, the phone calls he took in Italian at 3 in the morning. But he'd never brought that world home to her, and she'd never asked questions she wasn't ready to hear answers to. Their deal was simple. She gave him normalcy, a refuge from whatever darkness paid for their rent-controlled apartment in Little Italy, and he gave her safety, love, and the ability to support her brother's education. I mean, what do you even talk about with someone like that? Jessica was saying, gesturing with her wine glass. Sports? Beer? The latest reality TV show? Probably can't even spell portfolio, Patricia added, and they dissolved into laughter again. Sofia set down the water pitcher carefully, her face carefully neutral. Don't react. Don't give them the satisfaction. Just do your job and get through the shift. She turned to leave, but Vanessa's voice stopped her. Excuse me, waitress. Not a question, a command. Sofia turned back. Yes, ma'am? Vanessa held up her empty champagne flute. More champagne. The Veuve Clicquot, not that cheap Prosecco you've been serving everyone else. Of course. Sofia reached for the bottle on her tray. And try not to spill it this time, Caroline added with a smirk. I saw you nearly drop that tray earlier. Are you new at this? You seem inexperienced. Sofia hadn't dropped anything, hadn't even come close, but contradicting them would only make things worse. I'll be careful, ma'am. She poured the champagne with steady hands, years of nursing training making her movements precise and controlled. Not a drop spilled. She was turning to leave when Jessica spoke up. What's your name, sweetheart? Something about the condescension in sweetheart made Sofia's jaw tighten, but she kept her voice professional. Sofia, ma'am. Sofia, Jessica repeated, drawing out the syllables, mockingly. How exotic. You're not from around here, are you? Let me guess. Queens? Brooklyn? The Bronx originally, ma'am. The women exchanged knowing looks, an entire conversation happening in raised eyebrows and subtle smirks. The Bronx, Vanessa said, like she'd just confirmed something deeply distasteful. That explains well, never mind. Sofia felt heat crawl up her neck. Will there be anything else? Actually, yes. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, studying Sofia with the calculating look of someone who'd spotted entertainment. I'm curious, Sofia from the Bronx. What do you do when you're not serving champagne to your betters? The phrasing made Sofia's stomach turn. I'm a nurse, ma'am. I work at Mount Sinai. A nurse? Caroline's voice was bright with false enthusiasm. How noble. And you still need to work catering jobs on the side? What does that say about the state of healthcare worker compensation? What it said was that New York City was brutally expensive and Columbia University charged $60,000 a year, even with a full scholarship. But Sofia wasn't going to explain her financial situation to these women. Just helping family with expenses, ma'am. Family, Patricia said the word like it was foreign. Let me guess. Supporting a boyfriend? Husband? They always need supporting, don't they? The men from neighborhoods like yours. Sofia's hands clenched into fists at her sides, hidden by her server's apron. She thought about Marco, about the way he'd held her last night before she left for this shift, kissing her forehead and telling her to text him if she needed anything. Marco, who'd paid off her student loans as a wedding gift. Marco, who made sure her brother never worried about money. Marco, who loved her with a quiet intensity that still took her breath away 3 years into their marriage. My husband works very hard, ma'am, Sofia said quietly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other tables to attend to. She turned to leave, desperate to put distance between herself and these women before she said something that would get her fired. But Vanessa wasn't done. Wait, Vanessa said, and something in her tone made the neighboring tables go quiet. I want to know something. Sofia from the Bronx with the hard-working husband. Does it bother you? Sofia stopped. Does what bother me, ma'am? This. Vanessa gestured around the ballroom, at the crystal chandeliers and gilded walls and women dripping in jewelry. Seeing all this, knowing you'll never have it. Does it eat at you? Serving people who spend more on a handbag than you make in a year? The ballroom had gone noticeably quieter. Women at nearby tables were watching now, some with discomfort, most with the avid attention of people sensing drama. I'm just here to work, ma'am, Sofia said, keeping her voice level. What you have or don't have isn't my concern. Such dignity, Caroline said, mockery dripping from every word. How admirable. Look at her, girls, pretending she's not dying inside with jealousy. I think it's sweet, Jessica added, the little nurse playing dress-up in her server uniform, pretending she belongs in a place like this. Sofia's heart was pounding, her face hot with humiliation and rage she couldn't express. Other servers had stopped to watch, their faces sympathetic but helpless. Nobody intervened at events like this. Nobody protected the staff. You smiled, you took it, you survived, until the shift ended. I should get back to work, Sofia said, proud that her voice didn't shake. Oh, we're not done with you yet, Vanessa said, and her smile turned sharp. You know what I think, Sofia? I think you come to events like this and you dream about it. Dream about wearing the dresses, having the jewelry, belonging with us instead of serving us. It must be torture. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Don't lie. Vanessa's voice cut through Sofia's protest. It's written all over your face. That desperate hunger. That pathetic envy. You'll never be anything more than this, sweetheart. Never be anything more than help. And deep down, you know it. Something inside Sofia cracked. 3 months of double shifts and exhaustion and swallowing her pride for tips. Years of watching people like these women treat service workers like they were less than human. The casual cruelty, the assumption that money made them superior, the absolute confidence that there would never be consequences. "Ma'am," Sofia said, her voice shaking now, but not with fear, with pure, undiluted rage barely contained. "I don't envy you. I pity you. Because all the money in the world can't buy you class, and it certainly can't buy you decency. Now, if you'll excuse me," she turned to leave, and that's when it happened. Vanessa stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the marble floor. She grabbed her plate, still half full of salmon, roasted vegetables, and buttery potatoes, and in one smooth, deliberate motion, she threw it directly at Sofia. The food hit Sofia's chest with shocking force. Salmon slid down her white uniform blouse. Vegetables scattered across the floor. Butter and sauce soaked instantly through the fabric, hot and sticky against her skin. A piece of roasted potato landed in her hair. For one frozen moment, Sofia couldn't process what had just happened. Couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think past the humiliation burning through her like acid. Then the laughter started. Caroline was recording on her phone, her free hand covering her mouth in exaggerated shock. Jessica was practically doubled over, cackling with delight. Patricia had her hand pressed to her chest like she was witnessing the funniest thing she'd ever seen. "Oh my God," Caroline wheezed between laughs. "Did you see her face? Oh my God, Vanessa, that was incredible." Other tables had erupted in gasps and whispers. Some women looked away, uncomfortable. A few were smiling, enjoying the spectacle. Most just stared, their expressions carefully neutral, unwilling to get involved in something that didn't concern them. Sofia stood there, food dripping from her uniform, sauce running down her legs into her shoes. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. The humiliation was physical, crushing, a weight that made the room spin. "Maybe that'll teach you some humility," Vanessa said, sitting back down like nothing had happened. "Now clean this mess up. You're making the floor dirty." Her friends erupted in fresh laughter. The event coordinator appeared, her face pale with panic. "Sofia, I am so sorry. Please, go to the staff room and she can clean this up first." Vanessa interrupted, gesturing at the food scattered on the floor. "It's her job, isn't it?" Sofia's hands were shaking. She bent down mechanically, started picking up pieces of food with numb fingers. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she wouldn't cry, wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She'd survived worse than this. She'd survived. The ballroom doors opened. Sofia didn't look up, couldn't bear to see more people witnessing her humiliation. She just kept picking up food with trembling hands, sauce-stained and broken. But the room had gone silent, completely, absolutely silent. Not the uncomfortable quiet from before. Something different. Something that made the hair on the back of Sofia's neck stand up. Then she heard the footsteps. Slow, measured, deliberate. Expensive shoes against marble. Moving toward her table with terrible purpose. A voice cut through the silence. Deep, controlled, with an edge like a blade barely sheathed. "What the fuck just happened to my wife?" Sofia's head snapped up. Marco stood 10 feet away, and she'd never seen him look like this. Her husband, who kissed her gently every morning and made her coffee exactly how she liked it. Her husband, who laughed at terrible movies and held her when she came home exhausted from double shifts. Her husband, who'd always been so careful to keep his other life separate from hers. That Marco was gone. In his place stood someone she'd only glimpsed in fragments. Marco Romano, in a 3-piece suit that cost more than most cars, flanked by 2 men in dark suits whose jackets couldn't quite hide the weapons beneath. His face was perfectly calm, perfectly still. But his dark eyes burned with rage, so cold it felt like the temperature in the room had dropped 20 degrees. Behind him, she saw Franco, his head of security, and Luca, his second in command. Both of them had their hands inside their jackets, ready. The women at table 12 had frozen. Vanessa's smile had evaporated. Caroline's phone was still recording, but her hand had started to shake. Marco's eyes swept the scene. The food on the floor, the sauce staining Sofia's uniform, the piece of potato in her hair. Then his gaze landed on his wife's face, saw the tears she'd been fighting, the humiliation that had shattered something inside her. Something terrifying passed across. His expression. "Someone," he said, his voice quiet and absolutely deadly, "is going to explain to me why my wife is on her knees cleaning food off the floor. And whoever threw that food is going to wish they'd never been born." The room held its breath. Sofia rose slowly, food still clinging to her uniform. Marco. Not now, amore, he said gently, never taking his eyes off table 12. Franco, take Sofia to the car. Get her out of here. Marco, it's fine, It's not fine. He finally looked at her, and his expression softened for just a moment. Nothing about this is fine. Please, baby. Let Franco take you to the car. I need to handle this. The way he said handle this made it clear exactly what kind of handling he meant. Sofia looked at the women at table 12. Vanessa had gone white. Caroline had lowered her phone. Jessica and Patricia were trying to appear invisible. Which one of you? Marco said, turning his attention back to them. Threw food at my wife? Silence. I'm going to ask one more time. Marco took 3 steps closer to the table. The 2 men flanking him moved with him, perfectly synchronized. Which one? Sir, Vanessa said, her voice shaking now, trying for authoritative and landing on terrified. This is a private event. I don't know who you think you are, but Marco Romano. He said his name like it should mean something. From the way the color drained from Vanessa's face, it did. And you're Vanessa Whitmore. Your husband Richard is a real estate developer who uses my concrete for every building he constructs. Interesting. I wonder how his projects would go if my cement trucks suddenly stopped delivering. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed silently. Caroline Chen, Marco continued, his gaze shifting. Your father owns Chen Shipping. Lovely man. We have a very profitable arrangement moving goods through the port. Would be a shame if that arrangement ended. If his containers suddenly faced endless delays and inspections. Caroline had started to cry, mascara running down her cheeks. Jessica Hartwell, your husband is a hedge fund manager who invests heavily in New York construction. I believe he has money in 3 projects that depend on my cooperation with unions. Weird how quickly those projects could stall if the unions suddenly had concerns. Jessica was gripping the table edge so hard her knuckles had gone white. And Patricia Ashford. Marco's smile was terrible. Your family name is on half of Connecticut. But you still need permits, still need supplies, still need labor, all of which flow through channels I control. Are we beginning to understand each other? The women at table 12 looked like they were going to be sick. Now, Marco said pleasantly, I'm going to ask you ladies some questions, and you're going to answer them honestly. Who threw food at my wife? I did, Vanessa whispered. I threw the plate. I'm sorry, I didn't know. You didn't know she was married to me, Marco interrupted. So you thought it was acceptable to humiliate her. You thought because she was serving you, because she works for a living, she was less than human. That about sum it up? Vanessa couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face now. Here's what's going to happen, Marco said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Every woman in the room was watching now, frozen in their seats. You 4 are going to apologize to my wife, on your knees, in front of everyone here, and you're going to mean it. Because if you don't, I promise you, by tomorrow morning, your husband's businesses will be facing problems they can't imagine. Problems that will cost them everything. Please, Caroline sobbed. Please, we're sorry, we didn't mean. Save it, Marco cut her off. Sofia? Sofia had been watching this unfold like a dream. Like she'd stepped into some alternate reality where her gentle husband transformed into someone who could make 4 of Manhattan's wealthiest women cry with just words. Franco stood beside her, waiting. Mrs. Romano, he said quietly. The boss wants you comfortable. We can leave now if you want. No, Sofia heard herself say. I want to stay. Because something was happening here. Something bigger than her humiliation. These women had treated her like garbage because they thought there would be no consequences. Because people like her never got justice against people like them. Marco was about to prove them wrong. On your knees, he said again. And this time there was no mistaking it for a request. Vanessa stood first, her legs shaking, then Caroline, Jessica, Patricia, all 4 of them in their designer suits and expensive jewelry, getting down on their knees on the ballroom floor in front of 300 witnesses. Sofia, Vanessa said, her voice breaking, I am deeply sorry for what I did. It was cruel and inexcusable. I apologize. The other 3 echoed her, their apologies stumbling over, put each other in desperate attempts at sincerity. Sofia looked at them kneeling before her and felt something shift inside her chest. Not satisfaction exactly. Not revenge. Just acknowledgement. Recognition. These women saw her now. Really saw her. Get up, she said quietly. They scrambled to their feet, makeup ruined, dignity shattered. Marco moved to stand beside Sofia, his hand finding the small of her back. The touch was gentle, protective, completely at odds with the terrifying display of power he'd just executed. "If I hear," he said, addressing not just table 12 but the entire ballroom, "that anyone here has treated my wife or any other service worker with disrespect again, what happened today will look merciful in comparison. Do we understand each other?" 300 women nodded silently. "Good." Marco turned to Sofia, his expression softening completely. "Let's get you out of here, baby." She let him lead her toward the exit, Franco and Luca clearing a path through the silent crowd. As they walked, Sofia caught glimpses of faces, some shocked, some frightened, a few quietly pleased. At the ballroom doors, Marco paused and looked back at the event coordinator, who was standing frozen near table 12. "My wife will be paid for her full shift today, plus a bonus for emotional distress," he said calmly. "Have the check delivered to our home by tomorrow, and cancel any future contracts between the plaza and the Metropolitan Ladies Auxiliary. Tell them the venue is no longer available for their events." "Yes, Mr. Romano," the coordinator whispered. Immediately. They stepped into the hallway, and Sofia finally let out the breath she'd been holding. Her hands were still shaking. Her uniform was still covered in food. But somehow, she felt lighter than she had in hours. "You okay?" Marco asked, stopping to cup her face in his hands. "I don't know," she admitted. "Marco, what did you just do in there?" "I protected my wife," he said simply. "Like I always will. Now come on, let's get you cleaned up and home. We need to talk." As they walked toward the exit, Sofia realized that the careful separation between her world and Marco's had just shattered completely. There would be no more pretending she didn't know what he was capable of. She'd just watched her husband destroy 4 women's sense of security with nothing but words and veiled threats. Watched him command a room full of Manhattan's elite like a king among subjects. And the terrifying part? She wasn't horrified. She was grateful. Her life had just become infinitely more complicated. But as Marco helped her into the back of his car, his hand never leaving hers, Sofia realized something else. She'd never been safer. The penthouse overlooked Central Park, 30 floors above the chaos of Manhattan. Sofia had always loved this view, the way the city spread out like a glittering carpet of lights and possibility. But tonight, standing in their marble, bathroom wrapped in Marco's oversized robe while her food-stained uniform sat in the trash, the view felt different, like she was seeing it for the first time with clear eyes. Marco had been quiet during the drive home. Not angry, quiet, protective quiet. His arm stayed around her shoulders the entire ride. Franco driving in careful silence while Luca made phone calls in rapid Italian that Sofia tried not to understand. When they'd arrived at the building, the doorman had taken one look at Sofia's stained uniform and Marco's expression, and wisely said nothing. Now she stood in their bathroom, staring at her reflection. Food sauce still matted her dark hair despite her attempts to rinse it out. Her eyes looked tired, but something else too. Different. Like the woman staring back had crossed some invisible line and couldn't go back. A knock on the bathroom door. "Amore, can I come in?" "It's your bathroom too," Sofia said, managing a weak smile. Marco entered carrying a glass of red wine and one of his t-shirts. He set the wine on the counter and helped her out of his robe with gentle hands, slipping the soft cotton shirt over her head. It fell to her mid-thighs, drowning her smaller frame. "Better?" he asked. "Better." She accepted the wine glass, took a long sip. The wine was expensive. Everything Marco owned was expensive, though she'd trained herself not to think too hard about where the money came from. "We need to talk." "We do." He leaned against the counter beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "But first, I need you to know something. What happened today, what I did that was a fraction of what I wanted to do to those women. The only reason they're walking out of that ballroom on their own feet is because you were watching." Sofia's throat tightened. "Marco, let me finish." His voice was gentle but firm. "For 3 years, I've kept my world separate from yours. Let you believe I was just a guy who owned some construction companies, made decent money, had connections. I did that because you deserved normal. You deserved a husband who came home and talked about his day without you having to worry about federal indictments or rival families or any of the shit that comes with what I really do." "What you really do?" Sofia repeated. Her hands tightened around the wine glass. "Which is?" Marco studied her face for a long moment. Then he said simply, I run the Romano family operations. My grandfather built an empire from nothing when he came from Sicily in 1958. My father expanded it, made it legitimate on the surface, while maintaining the core business underneath. When he died 7 years ago, it fell to me. The core business, Sofia said quietly. Meaning? Meaning I control construction supply chains, union contracts, port operations, and waste management across New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Some of it's completely legitimate, some of it, he paused, some of it exists in gray areas. Money gets moved through channels that wouldn't survive federal scrutiny. Goods get imported that customs doesn't inspect too carefully. People pay for protection, for permits to move faster, for problems to disappear. The words hung in the air between them. Sofia should have been shocked, should have been horrified. But she wasn't, not really. Some part of her had always known. The security, the deference, the 3 a.m., phone calls in Italian, the way people looked at Marco like he was dangerous. You're in the Mafia, she said. Not a question. I prefer to think of it as organized business interests with traditional Italian family structures, Marco said with a slight smile. But yeah, baby, that's the polite way to say it. Sofia drank more wine, processing. How much of our life is built on this? All of it. His honesty was brutal. This penthouse, your brother's Columbia tuition, the fact that you can work at the hospital without worrying about bills that comes from my operations. The legitimate businesses make money, but the real power, the real wealth, that comes from the other side. And today, Sofia said slowly, when you walked into that ballroom, when you made those women kneel and apologize, that was you using your power. That was me being restrained. Marco's jaw tightened. You have no idea what I wanted to do when I saw you on the floor covered in food, humiliated by women who think they're better than you because they married wealth instead of earning it. What stopped you? You. He turned to face her fully. You, standing there trying not to cry. You, who works double shifts to support your brother. You, who comes home exhausted and still asks about my day. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Sofia. And I wasn't going to ruin that by putting bullets in 4 socialites in the middle of the Plaza Hotel. The casual way he said it, bullets, made Sofia's breath catch. Would you have? If I wasn't there? Marco's silence was answer enough. Sofia set down her wine glass with shaking hands. I should be terrified right now. Should be packing a bag and running. Normal women don't stay with men who casually talk about shooting people. You're not normal, Marco said quietly. You're extraordinary. And you're not running, are you? She looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who'd paid off her student loans as a wedding gift, who made sure her brother never worried about money, who held her when she came home crying after losing a patient at the hospital, who'd just destroyed 4 women's sense of security with nothing but words because they'd humiliated his wife. No, Sofia admitted. I'm not running. That's what scares me most. I should want to run, but all I feel is relieved, like I finally understand something that's been just out of focus for 3 years. Marco cupped her face in his hands. I love you. That's never been a lie. Everything else I might have hidden or downplayed, but never. That you're my wife, my partner, the person who makes this whole fucked up life worth living. I love you too. The words came easily, naturally. But Marco, if I'm really staying, with full knowledge of what you do, things have to be different. Different how? No more secrets. Sofia's voice was firm. No more pretending. If I'm part of your life, I'm part of all of it. I don't want to be protected from the truth anymore. I want to know what you're dealing with, what threatens us, what's happening. Something shifted in Marco's expression. Respect mixed with concern. Baby, some things are dangerous to know. Information that could make you a target. I'm already a target. Sofia gestured at herself. The moment you walked into that ballroom and claimed me publicly as your wife, as someone under your protection, I became a target. You can't put that genie back in the bottle. Marco was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. You're right. Okay. No more. Secrets. But that means I need you to understand something about my world. It's not just about money and power. There are rules, hierarchies, enemies. The Romano family has been dominant for decades. But that doesn't mean we're unchallenged. Who challenges you? The Calabrese family primarily. They've been trying to move into our territory for 5 years. Angelo Calabrese thinks he can take the port operations, the union contracts. We've maintained an uneasy peace, but it's fragile. Marco's expression darkened. And there's the feds. They've been investigating organized crime families for years. We're careful, we're smart, but they're always watching. Sofia processed this. So when you made those threats today, about shutting down construction projects and blocking shipments, you can actually do that? I can do that. Marco's voice was matter of fact. The Whitmore developments use my concrete and steel. Chen Shipping moves goods through ports I control. The Hartwell investments depend on union cooperation I can withdraw. And the Ashford family needs permits that city officials I know personally can delay indefinitely. I wasn't bluffing, Sofia. Those women's husbands will have problems if I decide they should. Will you? Decide they should? Marco considered this. That depends on them. If they keep their wives away from you, if they understand the lesson, then no. Business continues as normal. But if they think today was empty threats, if they try retaliation or come after you, he left the sentence unfinished. But the implication was clear. Sofia moved to the bathroom window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere down there, Vanessa Whitmore was probably crying, terrified of what Marco Romano might do to her husband's business. Caroline Chen was likely explaining to her father why a powerful mafia boss was angry with their family. Jessica and Patricia were facing consequences they'd never imagined when they decided to humiliate a waitress for entertainment. I should feel bad for them, Sofia said quietly. But I don't. Is that wrong? It's human. Marco came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. They hurt you, humiliated you, treated you like garbage because they thought there would be no consequences. You feeling satisfaction that they were wrong doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. Sofia leaned back against his chest. What happens now? Now you get to decide. Marco's breath was warm against her ear. You can go back to the hospital. Keep working your shifts. Live the life you've been living. I'll make sure those women and everyone at that event knows you're untouchable. Or you step fully into my world. Stop pretending you're just a nurse married to a construction guy. Accept that you're Sofia Romano, wife of a made man, someone with power and protection and all the complications that come with it. The choice should have been harder. But standing there in Marco's arms, looking out at a city her husband essentially controlled, Sofia realized the decision had already been made the moment she'd chosen not to run. I want to understand it, she said. Your world. The businesses, the operations, the family structure. I don't want to be a wife who's kept in the dark. I want to be your partner in everything. Marco turned her around, searched her face. You're sure? Because once you're in, once you know everything, there's no going back to innocent. You become complicit, aware. If the feds ever came after me, they'd come after you too. I'm sure. Sofia met his eyes steadily. Those women today, they saw me as nothing, as someone they could abuse without consequence. But when you walked in, when you claimed me as your wife, they saw power. They saw someone who mattered. I want to keep mattering, Marco. Not because of fear, but because I've earned respect in your world. Something like pride flickered across Marco's face. Then we do this right. Tomorrow, I introduce you properly to the family, my captains, my operations managers, the people who keep our businesses running. They need to know you're not just my wife, you're someone whose word carries weight. Will they accept that? A woman having authority? They'll accept what I tell them to accept. Marco's voice carried absolute certainty. And anyone who has a problem with my wife being involved will find themselves looking for new employment very quickly. Sofia kissed him, soft and lingering. I love you, even knowing everything I know now. Maybe especially knowing everything. I love you too, Amor. Marco pulled her closer. And I promise you, those women today learned a lesson they'll never forget. But more importantly, everyone in this city is going to learn that Sofia Romano is not someone you disrespect. Ever. They stood there as the city glittered below them, two people bound by love and now, fully, by the dangerous world they inhabited together. Sofia's old life, the one where she was just a nurse working catering shifts, had ended the moment food hit her chest in that ballroom. Her new life, as the wife of a mafia boss, as someone with power and protection and purpose, had just begun, and she was ready. The next morning, Sofia woke to find Marco already awake, sitting on the edge of their bed with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. She understood enough to catch phrases like, "Message needs to be clear, and no violence unless absolutely necessary." He ended the call when he noticed she was awake. "Morning, beautiful. Coffee's ready in the kitchen." Sofia sat up, Marco's t-shirt still drowning her frame. Were you making plans to hurt someone? I was making plans to ensure yesterday's lesson sticks. Marco leaned over and kissed her forehead. Nothing you need to worry about. Marco. Sofia's voice was firm. We agreed. No more secrets. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. Right, okay. I had Franco reach out to Richard Whitmore, Caroline's father Chen, Jessica's husband Bradley Hartwell, and the Ashford family patriarch. They're all meeting me for lunch today at Carbone. A friendly conversation about respect and consequences. Friendly, Sofia repeated skeptically. No broken bones, no threats, Marco promised. Just a clarification of how things work in this city. They need to understand that what their wives did yesterday wasn't just embarrassing. It was a breach of respect that affects our business relationships. Sofia threw back the covers and padded to the kitchen. The coffee was perfect, exactly how she liked it, 2 creams, 1 sugar. Marco followed her, leaning against the counter while she doctored her cup. I want to come, she said. Marco nearly choked on his espresso. To the meeting? To the meeting. Sofia met his eyes over her coffee cup. If this is about defending my honor, I should be there. These men need to see that I'm not some helpless wife hiding behind her husband. I'm a person who was wronged, and I'm part of the conversation about making it right. Baby, these aren't the kind of meetings where wives usually attend. I don't care what usually happens. Sofia set down her cup with enough force that it clattered against the marble. You said last night I could be your partner in this. That means being present for things like this, not sitting at home while you handle everything. Marco studied her for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. You know what? You're right. And honestly, having you there sends an even stronger message. Shows them that you're not intimidated, that you're standing beside me, not behind me. Exactly. Sofia felt a flutter of nervousness but pushed it down. What time? 1 o'clock. But Sofia, you need to understand something. These men, they're going to be uncomfortable. Old-school businessmen don't like women having power, having voices. I'm going to try to talk around you, over you, like you're not there. Let them try. Sofia's voice was steel wrapped in silk. I've spent years dealing with doctors who don't listen to nurses, patients who think women can't be competent medical professionals, and now socialites who think I'm beneath them. I know how to make men uncomfortable right back. Marco laughed, genuine and warm. God, I love you. Okay, we're doing this. But you're wearing something that makes a statement. I want them to see exactly who they're dealing with. 2 hours later, Sofia stood in their walk-in closet, a space bigger than her childhood bedroom, staring at clothes she'd accumulated over 3 years of being Marco's wife but rarely wore. Designer dresses, expensive shoes, jewelry that cost more than her first car. Marco had been generous, constantly buying her gifts, but Sofia had always felt uncomfortable in the role of pampered wife. She preferred her scrubs and comfortable jeans, practical clothes, for a working woman. But today wasn't about comfort. Today was about armor. She selected a black Armani dress, sleek, sophisticated, with a neckline that was professional but commanding. Paired it with Louboutin heels that added 4 inches to her height and made her feel powerful. Diamond studs that Marco had given her for their anniversary. Hair pulled back in a severe bun that showed off her bone structure and made her look older, more formidable. When she emerged from the closet, Marco was waiting in the bedroom wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin. He stopped mid-motion when he saw her, his eyes darkening with appreciation. Cristo Santo, he breathed. You look like you're about to destroy someone. That's the idea. Sofia did a slow turn. Too much? Perfect. Marco crossed to her, ran his hands down her arms. You look like a woman who belongs at that table, like someone who demands respect. These men are going to take one look at you and understand exactly what they're dealing with. Franco drove them to Carbone in the SUV, Luca following in a second vehicle with 2 additional security guards. The restaurant was in Greenwich Village, an Italian spot known for its old-school atmosphere and clientele that included celebrities, politicians, and people who preferred their business discussions private. Marco had reserved the private dining room in the back. As they walked through the main restaurant, Sofia felt eyes tracking them, curious, assessing, some recognizing Marco and quickly looking away. He kept his hand at the small of her back, proprietary and protective. The private room was elegant, all dark wood and low lighting. A single table set for 7. 4 men already sat waiting, all of them standing when Marco and Sofia entered. Their expressions ranged from nervous to carefully neutral. "Gentlemen," Marco said pleasantly, "thank you for coming. I believe you all know my wife, Sofia." Richard Whitmore was in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, wearing a suit that probably cost $10,000. He'd built half of Manhattan's luxury developments over the past 2 decades. Right now, he looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. John Chen was younger, maybe 50, with the sharp eyes of someone who'd built a shipping empire through ruthless efficiency. His daughter Caroline's behavior had clearly embarrassed him. Bradley Hartwell was Sophia's age, early 30s, with the soft features of someone who'd inherited wealth rather than earned it. His hedge fund managed billions in construction investments. He kept shooting nervous glances at Marco like he expected violence at any moment. And William Ashford, patriarch of the Connecticut Ashford dynasty, was old money personified. 70 years old, impeccably dressed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Until today. "Mr. Romano," Richard spoke first, his voice carefully respectful, "we appreciate the invitation to discuss yesterday's unfortunate incident." "Unfortunate," Marco repeated, his tone making the words sound ridiculous. "That's an interesting way to describe 4 women throwing food at my wife and humiliating her in front of 300 witnesses." Uncomfortable silence. "Please, sit," Marco continued, pulling out a chair for Sofia before taking his own seat at the head of the table. Franco positioned himself by the door, hands folded, face expressionless. The 4 men sat slowly, their body language screaming discomfort. "I invited you here," Marco said, accepting a menu from the waiter who'd appeared silently, "because we have business relationships. Good, profitable relationships that benefit everyone at this table. I'd like to keep those relationships intact, but that requires understanding." "Mr. Romano," William Ashford began, his aristocratic accent making even fear sound refined. "My daughter-in-law Patricia has expressed deep regret for her behavior. She was drunk, foolish, and completely out of line. The family is mortified." "Mortified," Marco said flatly. "Your daughter-in-law threw food at my wife, called her the help, laughed while Sofia cleaned up the mess on her knees. And you're mortified." "What my wife wants," Sofia said quietly, and 4 pairs of eyes snapped to her in surprise, "is not an apology from the women. We got that yesterday when they knelt in front of the entire ballroom." She paused, letting her words sink in. Marco had been right, these men were uncomfortable with her presence, with her voice carrying weight. "What I want," Sofia continued, her voice steady and cold, "is assurance that this kind of behavior stops. Not just toward me, but toward all service workers. Your wives, your daughters, your friends, they need to understand that treating people as less than human because they work for a living has consequences." "Mrs. Romano," John Chen said carefully, "I can assure you my daughter has learned her lesson. She's devastated by her actions, and your daughter," Sofia interrupted, "is devastated because she got caught, because there were consequences, not because she genuinely believes what she did was wrong." She leaned forward slightly. "I work as a nurse at Mount Sinai. I've worked in healthcare for 6 years. Do you know how many times doctors have dismissed my medical opinions because I'm a nurse? How many times patients have demanded a real professional because they assume nurses are less educated?" The men shifted uncomfortably. "And yesterday," Sofia continued, "I was working a catering shift to help pay my brother's college expenses. Your wives saw me serving champagne and decided that made me subhuman. Fair game for entertainment. A nobody who wouldn't matter." "Sofia," Marco said quietly, pride evident in his voice, "has a degree from Columbia School of Nursing. She speaks 3 languages fluently. She saves lives for a living, and your wives threw food at her because she was wearing a server's uniform." "We understand," Richard Whitmore said, his face pale. "And I can promise you, Mr. Romano, this will never happen again. My wife Vanessa has already withdrawn from the Metropolitan Ladies Auxiliary. She won't be attending any more public events for the foreseeable future." "Good start," Marco said. "But not enough," he signaled the waiter, who brought a folder to the table. Marco opened it, pulled out several documents, and slid them across to the 4 men. "These are donation commitments," Marco explained. $500,000 each to organizations supporting service workers, restaurants, healthcare, hospitality. Money for education, harassment prevention, workplace safety. You're going to write these checks today, and you're going to do it publicly. Press releases. Acknowledgement that your family's behavior was unacceptable. 500,000? Bradley Hartwell's voice cracked slightly. Mr. Romano, that's a fraction of what you spend on your wife's jewelry, Marco interrupted coldly. And a bargain compared to what happens if you refuse. Which is? William Ashford asked, and despite his fear, there was still steel in the old man's voice. Marco leaned back in his chair, perfectly relaxed. Richard, your Hudson Yards development needs a zoning variance that's currently tied up in City Council. Strange how these things get delayed indefinitely when the wrong people are asking questions. Richard paled further. John, your shipping containers move through Newark and Brooklyn ports, both of which have union operations I'm intimately familiar with. Strikes are terrible for business, especially when they last months. John Chen's jaw tightened. Bradley, your hedge fund's construction investments depend on projects staying on schedule. Funny how often accidents happen on job sites when safety protocols aren't being followed properly. Work stoppages, inspections, delays. Bradley looked like he might be sick. And William, Marco's voice went very quiet, very dangerous. Your family's been Connecticut royalty for generations. Old money, old power. But money doesn't mean much when federal investigators start asking questions about tax irregularities, offshore accounts, the kind of financial structures that don't hold up to scrutiny. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. So here's how this works, Marco continued pleasantly. You write the checks. You make the public statements. Your wives stay far away from my wife and any other service worker they might be tempted to abuse. And in exchange, our business relationships continue unchanged. Your projects stay on schedule. Your shipments move smoothly. Your investments stay profitable. And if we refuse? William asked. Marco smiled, and it was terrifying. Then you find out exactly how much of this city I control. How many officials owe me favors. How many business interests depend on my cooperation. You find out what happens when Marco Romano decides someone's not worth the trouble of maintaining peace. Sofia watched the four men process this, saw the moment each of them realized they had no choice, that Marco held all the cards and was being generous by even offering terms. We'll sign, Richard said quietly. All of us. The donations, the public statements, everything. Excellent. Marco signaled the waiter again. Now that business is settled, let's order lunch. The veal here is outstanding. The meal was surreal. 5 men and 1 woman, eating expensive Italian food while discussing construction schedules and shipping logistics like they were old friends. But underneath the civility, everyone at that table understood the power dynamic. Marco Romano had destroyed these men's sense of security with nothing but words and veiled threats, had made them pay literally for their family's cruelty. And he'd done it with Sofia sitting beside him, not as decoration, but as an equal partner, demanding accountability. When the check came, which Marco paid without looking at the 4 men, stood to leave. Richard paused beside Sofia's chair. Mrs. Romano, he said quietly, for what it's worth, I am genuinely sorry. What my wife did was inexcusable, and you're right, it's not enough to apologize. But I promise you, things will be different. Sofia studied his face and saw genuine shame there. See that they are, Mr. Whitmore, because next time, there won't be a lunch meeting. There will just be consequences. He nodded and left with the others, filing out like chastened schoolboys rather than titans of business. When they were alone, Marco turned to Sofia and laughed, the sound rich with genuine amusement and pride. You were incredible. Absolutely incredible. Did you see their faces when you started talking? They didn't know what hit them. I just told the truth, Sofia said, but she was smiling. They needed to hear it from me, not just from you. They needed to see that you're not someone who needs protecting, Marco corrected. That you can hold your own in a room full of powerful men and make them uncomfortable. That's respect, baby. Real respect. Franco appeared in the doorway. Boss, we're clear to leave. The donations will be processed by end of business today. Good. Marco stood, helped Sofia from her chair. Make sure the press releases go out tomorrow. I want everyone to know these families are making amends. On the drive home, Sofia felt exhaustion settling over her like a heavy blanket. The adrenaline from the meeting was fading, leaving behind the reality of what had just happened. She'd sat at a table with 4 of New York's most powerful men and demanded accountability, had watched her husband casually threaten their livelihoods, had been part of something that existed in the gray space between legal business and organized crime, and she'd felt powerful doing it. You okay? Marco asked, his hand finding hers in the back seat. I think so. Sofia leaned her head against his shoulder. That was intense. You were perfect. Marco kissed the top of her head. Those men will never forget this. Never forget that Sofia Romano is someone who commands respect, and anyone who thinks about disrespecting you in the future will remember what happened today. Is it always like this, your world? Sometimes more subtle, sometimes more violent, Marco admitted. But yeah, essentially, it's about power, respect, and making people understand where the lines are. You crossed a line into my world yesterday, baby. Now everyone knows it. Sofia was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, I don't regret it. I thought I might, but I don't. I feel liberated, like I finally understand something that's been hidden from me. Good. Marco's voice was warm. Because tomorrow, I'm introducing you to the family. The real family. My captains, my operations managers, the people who actually run our businesses. They need to. I know you're part of this now. Will they accept it? Me being involved? They'll accept it because I tell them to, Marco said firmly. But more than that, they'll accept it because you're smart, capable, and you just proved you can handle yourself in a high-pressure situation. Respect in my world isn't given, Sofia. It's earned. You started earning it today. As the SUV wound through Manhattan traffic toward their penthouse, Sofia looked out at the city and felt something shift inside her. The woman who'd been humiliated yesterday in a ballroom was gone. In her place was someone new, someone stronger, Sofia Romano, wife of a Mafia boss. A woman who'd just made 4 powerful families pay for disrespecting her, and she was just getting started. The Romano family compound sat in Brooklyn, a 3-story brownstone that had belonged to Marco's grandfather. From the outside, it looked like any other well-maintained building in the neighborhood, flower boxes in the windows, a freshly painted door, kids playing stickball on the sidewalk. Nothing about it screamed organized crime headquarters. But Sofia knew better now. Marco had explained it during the drive from Manhattan. The compound is where we conduct family business, not the legitimate stuff that happens at the offices downtown. This is where we discuss operations, resolve disputes, make decisions that can't be traced back through legal channels. Now, standing on the front steps at 10 in the morning, Sofia felt her stomach twist with nerves. This was different than the lunch meeting yesterday. Those men had been outsiders, business associates who'd needed to be reminded of boundaries. The people inside this building were Marco's inner circle, his family, by blood and by oath. You ready? Marco asked, his hand warm on the small of her back. Sofia had dressed carefully again, not as severe as yesterday, but still commanding. A burgundy wrap dress that was professional but feminine, paired with heels that made her feel taller, more confident. Hair down today, soft waves that made her look approachable while the dress said she meant business. Ready, she said, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Franco opened the door before they could knock. Boss, Mrs. Romano. Everyone's assembled in the meeting room. The interior of the brownstone was warm and lived in. Family photos lined the hallway. Marco's grandparents in Sicily, his parents on their wedding day, Marco himself as a child with gap-toothed smile. It reminded Sofia of her own childhood home in the Bronx, that particular feeling of generational history soaked into the walls. But the meeting room on the 2nd floor was all business. A long table dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs. Maps of New York's boroughs covered one wall, marked with colored pins that Sofia suspected indicated territories and operations. A sidebar held coffee and pastries, and the whole room smelled like espresso and old wood. 8 men stood as Marco and Sofia entered. Their faces ranged from curious to skeptical to openly hostile. Sofia recognized a few of them: Luca, Marco's second in command, who'd been at the plaza; Franco, of course. But the others were new. Gentlemen, Marco said, his voice carrying easy authority. Most of you have heard about what happened 2 days ago at the Plaza Hotel. Some of you were there. For those who weren't, here's what you need to know. 4 women decided to humiliate my wife by throwing food at her while she worked a catering shift. They treated her like garbage because they thought she was nobody, nothing, someone beneath their concern. The men's expressions darkened. Even the hostile ones looked angry at this. I made it clear that such disrespect would not be tolerated, Marco continued. Yesterday, I met with the husbands and fathers of those women. They've agreed to make substantial donations to service worker organizations and issue public apologies. The message has been sent. Sofia Romano is under my protection, and anyone who disrespects her answers to me. He moved to stand beside Sofia, his hand finding hers. But more than that, I'm here to tell you that Sofia is no longer just my wife. She's my partner. She has full knowledge of our operations, and she'll be involved in family business going forward. Her word carries the same weight as mine. The room erupted. Boss, with all due respect, started a heavy-set man in his 50s, his Brooklyn accent thick. Women don't belong in this business, interrupted a younger guy with slicked-back hair and expensive watch. This is a mistake, said another, older man with gray at his temples. No offense to Mrs. Romano, but this isn't how things are done. Marco's voice cut through the objections like a blade. Sit down. The authority in those two words was absolute. The men sat, though some looked mutinous. Let me be very clear, Marco said, his tone dangerously quiet. I am the head of this family. I make the decisions about who is brought into our confidence and who is excluded. And I have decided that my wife, who is intelligent, educated, and perfectly capable of understanding our operations, will be included. Boss, the older man tried again. It's not about capability. It's about tradition, security. The more people who know our business, the more exposure we have. Dominic makes a good point, said the heavy-set man. No disrespect, Mrs. Romano, but knowledge is dangerous. The feds could pressure you, use you against the boss. Sofia had been silent until now, letting Marco handle the objections. But she understood what was happening. These men weren't going to accept her authority just because Marco declared it. They needed to see proof that she deserved to be here. May I? She asked Marco quietly. He nodded, stepping back slightly to give her space. Sofia moved to stand at the head of the table, meeting each man's eyes in turn. You're worried I'm a liability, that I'm a weak point the feds could exploit. That's fair. You don't know me, don't know if I can be trusted, if I can handle the pressure of knowing what you do. Several men nodded, surprised she understood their concerns. Here's what you should know, Sofia continued, her voice steady and clear. I'm a trauma nurse at Mount Sinai. I've spent 6 years dealing with gunshot wounds, stab wounds, overdoses, the consequences of violence that happens in this city every single day. I know how to keep my mouth shut. I know how to handle pressure. And I know how to look someone in the eye and lie convincingly when their life depends on it. That got their attention. Even the hostile ones were listening now. I speak 3 languages fluently, Sofia continued. English, Spanish, and Italian. I can read and understand contracts, financial documents, medical records. I have a degree from Columbia. I'm not some naive housewife Marco is trying to include because he feels guilty. Then why involve yourself? Asked Dominic, the older man. His voice wasn't hostile now, just genuinely curious. You have a good life, a legitimate career. Why risk that by stepping into our world? Because 2 days ago, I learned something about myself, Sofia said quietly. When those women humiliated me, when they threw food at me and laughed, I felt powerless, invisible, like I didn't matter. And I hated it. Not just the humiliation, but the helplessness of knowing there was nothing I could do about it. She paused, letting her words sink in. Then Marco walked in. And suddenly I mattered. Suddenly I had power, protection, respect. And I realized I'd been living half a life, pretending my husband was just a construction businessman, pretending our wealth came from legitimate sources alone. I was hiding from the truth because it was easier than facing complexity. Sofia met Marco's eyes across the table. I love my husband, and I'm tired of being protected from his reality. I want to be his partner in everything, not just the easy parts. That means understanding this world, contributing to it, and yes, accepting the risks that come with knowledge. The room was silent. Then Franco spoke up from his position by the door. She saved our asses in the parking garage attack last month, spoke Albanian, warned us about the flanking squad before they could box us in. 3 of us would be dead without her quick thinking. Sofia blinked. She'd forgotten Marco had mentioned an incident, but hadn't realized the details. That's true, Luca confirmed. I was there. Mrs. Romano kept her head, processed information under pressure, acted decisively. She's already proven she can handle herself in dangerous situations. The younger guy with the expensive watch Sofia thought his name was Tony leaned forward. You speak Albanian? I studied linguistics in college, Sofia explained. 5 languages total, though my Albanian is rusty, but enough to understand when someone's planning an ambush. That's useful, Tony admitted grudgingly. We've been having issues with the Calabrese family's Albanian connections. Someone who can listen to their conversations without them knowing. Could provide valuable intelligence, finished Dominic. He studied Sofia with new respect. Boss, I take back my objection. If Mrs. Romano has already proven herself in the field, and she's willing to accept the risks, then who am I to argue? One by one, the other men nodded agreement. Some looked genuinely convinced. Others clearly still had reservations but were willing to defer to Marco's judgment. Good, Marco said, satisfaction evident in his voice. Then let's move forward. Sofia, these are my captains. You've met Franco and Luca. The others. Dominic Russo handles our waste management operations. Vincent Caruso runs union negotiations. Tony Battaglia manages port operations. Michael Greco oversees construction supply chains. Anthony DeLuca coordinates with our political contacts. And Paolo Benedetti handles our legitimate business investments. Sofia nodded to each man, committing names and faces to memory. Thank you for giving me a chance to prove myself. I know I'm asking you to trust me based on Marco's word and one incident. I intend to earn your trust through action. Respectfully, Mrs. Romano, said Vincent, the union negotiator. How exactly do you plan to contribute? We've been running these operations for years. What can you offer that we don't already have? It was a fair question, and Sofia had been thinking about this since yesterday. I can offer a different perspective, she said. You're all men who've been in this world your entire lives. You think in terms of territory, respect, traditional power structures. That's valuable. But it also makes you predictable to your enemies. She moved to the wall map, studied the colored pins marking different operations. I'm also a medical professional with access to hospital, records, patient information, ambulance routes. I hear things in the ER, gang violence, drug overdoses, territorial disputes that end in gunshot wounds, information that could give you advance warning about rival family activities. That's actually smart, Tony admitted. We've been blind to a lot of street-level activity. Hospital intelligence could fill gaps. Plus, Sofia continued, warming to her subject, I can move in circles you can't. Charity events, fundraisers, social gatherings where wealthy businessmen and politicians congregate. They see a nurse married to a construction businessman. They don't see a threat. They talk freely around me, assuming I'm not important enough to matter. I could gather intelligence you'd never be able to access. Like corporate espionage, Luca said, but in designer dresses at charity galas. Exactly. Sofia smiled. I'm already scheduled to volunteer at a healthcare fundraiser next month. State legislators will be there, city council, members, business leaders. The kind of people who make decisions that affect your operations. I can listen, build relationships, find out who's corruptible and who's dangerous. Marco was watching her with barely concealed pride. See, this is what I'm talking about. Sofia doesn't think like us. She sees opportunities we'd miss because we're focused on traditional methods. I'm convinced, said Dominic. Mrs. Romano clearly has valuable skills and she's thought seriously about how to contribute. I'm in, the other captains murmured agreement, even the skeptical ones looking impressed. There's one more thing, Sofia said, and she felt her voice shake slightly with nerves. If I'm going to be part of this family, I need to understand the full scope of what you do. Not just the legitimate businesses, but everything. The money laundering, the illegal shipments, the protection rackets, whatever operations exist that I don't know about yet. Sofia, Marco started, but she held up a hand. I need to know, she insisted. All of it. Because if the feds ever do come after you, after us, I need to know exactly what I'm facing. What charges could be filed, what evidence they might have, how to protect myself and this family. No more protective ignorance. The captains looked at Marco, waiting for his decision. Marco was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, Franco, get the financial records. Luca, pull up the operational maps. Gentlemen, we're going to spend today bringing Sofia fully into the fold. Everything she wants to know, we answer honestly. What followed was the most surreal 4 hours of Sofia's life. They walked her through the entire Romano operation, using maps, spreadsheets, and decades of institutional knowledge. She learned that Marco's construction supply business was actually a complex network that controlled concrete, steel, lumber, and equipment suppliers across 3 states, legitimate on the surface, but structured to allow cash from illegal activities to flow through and emerge clean. The waste management contracts were both real business and convenient cover for disposing of things and occasionally people that needed to disappear. Port operations moved legal cargo alongside containers that customs never inspected too carefully, bringing in luxury goods that avoided import taxes and occasionally more problematic merchandise. Union control meant Marco could shut down construction across the city with a word, could slow projects to a crawl, could make life impossible for any developer who didn't play along. And the political connections city councilmen, state legislators, judges, police captains, all carefully cultivated over decades, all receiving campaign contributions and consulting fees that bought loyalty and looked away when necessary. "We're not the Colombo family," Marco explained, referencing one of New York's famous crime families. "We're smaller, more focused, more careful. We don't deal in drugs, human trafficking, prostitution, the things that bring federal heat and destroy communities. We stick to what my grandfather built: construction, waste, ports, unions, boring infrastructure crime that makes steady money and doesn't attract attention. Usually," Luca added with a wry smile, "until the boss's wife gets humiliated at the plaza and we have to remind Manhattan's elite who actually runs this city." By early afternoon, Sofia's head was spinning with information. Shell companies, offshore accounts, legitimate businesses used as fronts, carefully structured deals that would take forensic accountants months to untangle. It was overwhelming and terrifying and somehow fascinating. "Questions?" Marco asked, watching her process everything. "Just one," Sofia said slowly. "If this is organized crime, where's the violence? Everything you've described is financial manipulation, labor control, bureaucratic corruption. But no mention of," she hesitated, "hurting people." The captains exchanged glances. Then Dominic spoke up. "Mrs. Romano, we're not saints. Violence happens when it's necessary. When someone disrespects the family, threatens our operations, or needs to be reminded of boundaries. But we're not bloodthirsty. We prefer financial pressure, legal maneuvering, making problems disappear through bureaucratic channels. But if those methods fail," Sofia pressed, "then we escalate," Marco said quietly. "But that's always a last resort. My grandfather used to say that every act of violence is a failure of imagination. If you're smart enough, creative enough, you can usually solve problems without bloodshed." "Usually," Sofia repeated. "Usually," Marco confirmed. "I won't lie to you, baby. People have died because of decisions I've made. Rival family members who pushed too far, traitors within our organization, threats that couldn't be neutralized any other way. But I don't take those decisions lightly, and I don't delegate violence, casually." Sofia absorbed this. It should have horrified her, should have sent her running. But somehow, sitting in this room surrounded by men who'd just spent hours patiently explaining their criminal enterprise to her, she felt oddly safe, protected, part of something larger than herself. "Okay," she said finally. "I can live with that. As long as I'm never asked to participate in planning violence, to help hurt someone, I can accept that it's part of this world." "That's exactly the boundary we discussed," Marco confirmed. "You're an advisor, an intelligence gatherer, a partner in strategic decisions, but you're not a soldier, and I'll never ask you to be." "Good." Sofia stood, stretched. 4 hours of sitting had made her stiff. "Then I think we're done for today. My brain is full." "One more thing," Franco said from the door. "Boss, we got word that the Calabrese family is moving on the port of Newark. Angelo's been making noise about taking over container operations there." Marco's expression hardened. "When?" "Meeting tomorrow night with the Port Authority officials. Angelo's offering double what we pay in monthly consulting fees. He's trying to buy our access." "Son of a bitch," Marco muttered. "All right, we need to counter with strategic pressure, not higher bribes." Sofia interrupted. Everyone turned to look at her. She flushed slightly but continued. "If you get into a bidding war, you could win but at unsustainable cost. Instead, remind the Port Authority officials why they prefer working with you." "How?" Tony asked, genuinely curious. Sofia thought about it, applying the logic she'd learned in nursing. When you couldn't outmuscle a problem, you outmaneuvered it. Angelo is aggressive, unpredictable. You're established, stable, someone they've worked with for years without major problems. Emphasize reliability. Maybe have your legitimate business contacts, the ones the Port Authority officials know, are real, express concerns about the Calabrese family's reputation for violence. Make Angelo look like a risk rather than an opportunity, Luca said slowly. That's smart. They're more likely to stick with us if switching feels dangerous. Plus, Sofia added, if Angelo does manage to take some operations, that gives you leverage to pressure other areas where he's vulnerable. Let him have a small victory that actually costs him more than it gains. Strategic retreat to draw him into overextension. The captains were staring at her now with something like respect. Did you just quote Sun Tzu? Vincent asked. I read a lot during slow shifts at the hospital, Sofia said with a slight smile. The art of war applies to more than just military strategy. Marco laughed, pulling her close. See? This is exactly what I'm talking about. Sofia thinks about problems completely differently than we do. We would have gone straight to either matching Angelo's bribe or intimidating the port officials. Her approach is subtler, probably. More effective. I like her, Tony declared. Mrs. Romano, you're officially my favorite addition to this family in years. Boss, I take back every reservation I had. Your wife is an asset. The other captains murmured. Agreement. Even the ones who'd been openly hostile earlier. Sofia had proven herself not through violence or traditional displays of power, but by demonstrating that she could think strategically, contribute meaningfully, and hold her own in their world. Thank you, Sofia said, genuine warmth in her voice. I know this is unconventional. I know I'm asking you to trust someone who hasn't earned it yet through years of service. But I promise you, I take this seriously. I won't betray this family's trust. You better not, Franco said, but he was smiling. Because we're all invested now. You're one of us, Mrs. Romano. That means we protect you, and you protect us. That's how family works. One of us. The word settled over Sofia like a benediction and a burden. She'd crossed the line completely now. Wasn't just Marco's wife anymore, she was a member of the Romano crime family, with all the protection and danger that entailed. As they left the brownstone an hour later, Sofia felt exhausted but exhilarated. The captains had accepted her. Marco was proud, and she'd actually contributed meaningful strategy to a real problem. You were incredible in there, Marco said as Franco drove them back to Manhattan. The way you handled their objections, the strategic thinking about the port situation, baby. I knew you were smart, but that was next level. I was terrified, Sofia admitted. Those men have been in this life for decades. Who am I to tell them how to run operations? You're someone who brings fresh perspective, Marco countered. Someone who isn't locked into traditional thinking. That's valuable, Sofia. More valuable than you realize. Her phone buzzed. A text from her brother, Miguel. Sis, saw a news article about some big donations to service worker funds. 4 wealthy families made huge contributions. Any idea what that's about? Sofia smiled and typed back. Karma working exactly how it should. Tell you more later. Love you. Miguel? Marco asked, seeing her expression. He saw the news about the donations, Sofia said. Wants to know what happened. Are you going to tell him? Sofia considered. Her brother was 19, brilliant, idealistic, everything she'd worked so hard to protect. But he was also family, and families didn't keep secrets from each other. Not anymore. Eventually, she said, when he's ready to understand that the world isn't as simple as good guys and bad guys, that sometimes people do complicated things for good reasons. That's very diplomatic, Marco observed. I learned from the best. Sofia leaned her head on his shoulder. Marco? Yeah, baby? Thank you for letting me in, for trusting me with this. I know it complicates things, makes me a potential liability, but I needed to see the whole picture, to be your real partner. You're not a liability, Marco said firmly. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, and having you fully in my world, understanding what I do, why I do it, that's worth any risk. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, the city passing by outside. Sofia watched Manhattan's skyline approach and thought about how much had changed in just 3 days. 3 days ago, she'd been a nurse working catering shifts, married to a man she loved but didn't fully understand. Now she was Sofia Romano, full partner to a Mafia boss, accepted member of a crime family, someone with power and purpose and a future far more complicated than she'd ever imagined. The woman who'd been humiliated at the Plaza Hotel was gone forever. In her place was someone stronger, more dangerous, more alive. And Sofia couldn't wait to see what happened next. The next 2 weeks passed, in a blur of new routines and steep learning curves. Sofia continued working at Mount Sinai 3 shifts a week instead of her previous 5, but now she paid attention to things she'd previously ignored. Gang violence patterns, drug overdose clusters, which neighborhoods were experiencing upticks in certain types of injuries. She started keeping notes, sharing intelligence with Marco's captains during weekly meetings at the brownstone. Her medical knowledge combined with street-level information proved valuable in ways she hadn't anticipated. Gunshot wounds from the Calabrese territory are up 15% this month, she reported during one meeting. Mostly young guys, late teens to early 20s. Either Angelo's recruiting aggressively, or there's internal conflict we don't know about. That tracks with what we're hearing, Luca confirmed. Angelo's been pushing expansion too fast. His lieutenants are fighting over territory, which makes him vulnerable, Marco observed. Overextended and dealing with internal problems, good time to press our advantage. Sofia also threw herself into the social circuit she'd previously avoided. Charity galas, fundraisers, networking events where Manhattan's wealthy gathered to see and be seen. But now she went with purpose, ears open, carefully cultivating relationships with people who had information worth knowing. At a healthcare fundraiser, she chatted with a state senator's wife who complained about her husband's late nights, meeting with those construction union people who think they run the city. At a museum gala, she overheard 2 real estate developers discussing that Calabrese situation and how it was affecting their projects. At a children's hospital benefit, she made friends with the wife of a federal prosecutor who mentioned, after 3 glasses of wine, that organized crime investigations are heating up again, focusing on port operations. Every piece of information went into her mental database, got, and reported back to Marco and the captains, helped them stay ahead of problems and anticipate threats. "You're a natural at this," Marco told her after she'd relayed the federal prosecutor information. "You make it look effortless." "It helps that they don't see me as a threat," Sofia admitted. "I'm just a nurse married to a construction guy. They have no idea I'm actually gathering intelligence for a crime family." "Keep it that way," Marco said. "Your best asset is that nobody suspects you." But not everyone was blind to the changes in Sofia's life. Her best friend from nursing school, Jessica Chen, no relation to the Caroline Chen, who'd been at the plaza, cornered her after a shift at Mount Sinai. "Okay, spill," Jessica demanded, dragging Sofia into the break room. "What's going on with you?" "What do you mean?" Sofia asked innocently. "You've been different lately. More confident. More. I don't know, powerful. And you're working fewer shifts but somehow have more money. Plus, I saw that news story about the Plaza Hotel incident. 4 women groveling to you on camera? Sofia? What the hell?" Sofia debated how much to reveal. Jessica was her oldest friend, had been her roommate through nursing school, knew her better than almost anyone except Marco. But she was also someone who existed entirely in the legitimate world, someone who wouldn't understand the complexities of the life Sofia had chosen. "Marco's business is doing really well," Sofia said carefully. "Better than I realized. And those women at the plaza learned you don't disrespect people just because they work for a living. Your husband made 4 wealthy families donate millions of dollars and issue public apologies." Jessica said flatly, "Nobody has that kind of power unless they're connected to something serious." "Sofia, is Marco in the mob?" The direct question hung in the air between them. Sofia could lie, could maintain the fiction, but looking at her best friend's concerned face, she realized she was tired of hiding. "Yes," she said quietly. "Marco runs organized crime operations in New York. Construction, ports, unions, waste management. It's what his family has done for 3 generations." Jessica went pale. "Oh my God, Sofia." "I know how it sounds," Sofia interrupted. "Believe me, I know. But it's more complicated than mob movies make it seem. Marco's not a violent psychopath. He's a businessman who operates in gray areas, who uses power and influence instead of bullets, who actually does more good for working people than most legitimate businessmen do. Sofia, people go to prison for this kind of thing. Federal prison. RICO charges. Conspiracy. Racketeering." Jessica's voice was rising. "Keep your voice down," Sofia said urgently, glancing at the closed break room door. "Please, Jess. I know you're worried, but I've made my choice. I'm in this completely, with full knowledge of what it means." Jessica stared at her like she was a stranger. "What happened to you? 3 weeks ago, you were complaining about overtime shifts and medical supply costs. Now you're casually discussing organized crime like it's normal." "What happened," Sofia said, "is that I got tired of being invisible. of working myself to exhaustion and still being treated like garbage by people who think money makes them better than me. Marco offered me something different: power, respect, the ability to actually matter in this world. At what cost? Jessica asked. Your soul? Your freedom when the feds finally build a case? Maybe. Sofia's voice was steady. But it's my choice to make. And I'm asking you, as my friend, to keep this conversation between us. Jessica was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I'm not going to report you or Marco. You're my best friend, and I love you. But Sofia, I'm scared for you. This world you're entering, it destroys people. And I don't want to watch you become someone I don't recognize. I'm still me, Sofia insisted. Just more. Complete. More honest about who I am and what I want. I hope that's true, Jessica said quietly. I really do. They left the conversation there, but Sofia knew something had shifted in their friendship. Jessica looked at her differently now, with wariness mixed with the affection. It hurt, but Sofia understood. She'd crossed into territory most people couldn't follow. That night, she told Marco about the conversation. You think she'll keep quiet? He asked, concerned. She will, Sofia said with confidence. Jessica's scared, but she's loyal. She won't betray me. Still, Marco said thoughtfully, it's a reminder that we need to be careful. The more people who know, the more exposure we have. I know, Sofia curled against his side on their penthouse couch. But I can't hide forever. Eventually, people notice changes. True. Marco kissed the top of her head. Speaking of changes, how do you feel about the past 2 weeks? Any regrets? Sofia considered the question seriously. 2 weeks of living fully in Marco's world. 2 weeks of intelligence gathering, strategic planning, attending meetings where criminal operations were discussed openly. 2 weeks of being Sofia Romano, not just in name but in truth. No regrets, she said finally. I feel more alive than I have in years, more purposeful, like I finally understand my place in the world. Good. Marco's voice was warm. Because I have something to ask you. He shifted, reaching into his pocket, and Sofia's heart skipped. Was he about to? But he pulled out a key, not a ring. Small, brass, old-looking. This is the key to my grandfather's safe, Marco explained. It's in the brownstone, contains documents and records going back to when he first started operations in 1958. Family history, business deals, connections that still matter today. Sofia took the key, feeling its weight in her palm. Only 3 people have ever had access to that safe, Marco continued. My grandfather, my father, and me. I'm giving you the 4th key because you're not just my wife anymore, Sofia. You're family, real family, with all the trust and responsibility that implies. Tears pricked Sofia's eyes. Marco, you've proven yourself, he said simply. To me, to the captains, to everyone who matters. This is me saying officially, you're one of us now. Completely, irrevocably, one of us. Sofia closed her hand around the key, feeling the magnitude of what he was offering. Access to the family's deepest secrets, to information that could destroy them all if it fell into the wrong hands. Trust absolute and terrifying. I won't let you down, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I know you won't. Marco pulled her close. Because you're Sofia Romano, and you're exactly where you belong. They sat there as the city glittered below, 2 people bound by love and now, fully, by the dangerous world they'd chosen together. The woman who'd been humiliated 3 weeks ago at the plaza. Hotel was a distant memory. In her place was someone new, someone powerful, someone who'd just been given the keys to an empire. And the best part? She was just getting started. 3 months after the Plaza Hotel incident, Sofia Romano had become someone she barely recognized and yet, somehow more herself than ever before. She'd stopped working at Mount Sinai entirely. The decision hadn't been easy. Nursing had been her identity for 6 years, the career she'd worked herself through college to achieve. But trying to maintain hospital shifts while actively participating in Marco's operations had become impossible. The exhaustion, the divided attention, the risk of making medical errors because her mind was elsewhere, it all added up to a choice that needed making. Are you sure? Marco had asked when she'd told him. Baby, I never wanted you to give up your career for this. I'm not giving it up, Sofia had corrected. I'm redirecting it. I can do more good using my medical knowledge to help our operations, to keep our people safe. And than I can, working 3 shifts a week at a hospital that has dozens of other nurses. She'd set up a private medical clinic in the basement of the Brooklyn brownstone. Nothing fancy, but equipped enough to handle emergencies, stitching wounds, treating infections, dealing with injuries that couldn't be taken to hospitals without generating police reports. Marco's people no longer had to risk exposure seeking legitimate medical care for problems that arose from their work. Word had spread quickly. Other families started quietly asking if their people could access Sofia's services. She charged nothing, asked no questions, and kept immaculate records that existed nowhere but in her encrypted laptop. Within weeks, she'd become the unofficial doctor for New York's organized crime families. It gave her access, intelligence, and respect that transcended the Romano family. She knew who was injured, who was fighting with whom, what. Operations had gone sideways. Information flowed to her naturally because people trusted medical professionals, even criminal ones. "You've created something brilliant," Luca told her during one of their weekly strategy meetings. "You're now the most connected person in this room, and you've been in the life for 3 months. That's unprecedented." Sofia smiled at the compliment. She'd also become frighteningly good at the social intelligence game. Her calendar was packed with charity events, fundraisers, gallery openings anywhere. Manhattan's wealthy and powerful congregated. She'd cultivated friendships with senators' wives, prosecutors' girlfriends, real estate developers' daughters. They saw her as harmless. A nurse who'd married well, who wore designer dresses and attended the right events but remained fundamentally unthreatening. They had no idea that every conversation, every casual comment, every piece of gossip got analyzed and reported back to Marco's organization. The federal prosecutor's wife mentioned they're building a case against port operations, Sofia reported casually during dinner one evening. Nothing specific, but she said her husband has been working late, meeting with customs officials. "I'd say you have maybe 6 months before they move." Marco had immediately activated contingency plans, shifting operations, burying evidence, creating layers of deniability. When the federal investigation finally went public 5 months later, the Romano family had already insulated themselves. Other families got swept up in indictments. The Romanos remained untouched. "You saved us millions in legal fees and possibly years of prison time," Marco told her afterward. That intelligence was invaluable. But Sofia's greatest contribution came from an unexpected source: the wives themselves. She'd been attending a luncheon at the Metropolitan Club, the same organization that had hosted the Plaza Hotel event, where she'd been humiliated when she overheard something that changed everything. Vanessa Whitmore was there. They hadn't spoken since the public apology 3 months ago, and Vanessa looked like she'd aged years in that time. The humiliation had broken something in her. She was quieter now, more careful, hyper-aware of how she treated service staff. But it was Vanessa's companion who caught Sofia's attention. A younger woman, maybe 30, with the desperate look of someone drowning in problems. They sat 3 tables away, and Sofia's trained ears picked up fragments of their conversation. "Can't keep covering for him. The police are asking questions. Angelo thinks he's untouchable." Angelo. Sofia's attention sharpened. Angelo Calabrese, the rival boss who'd been challenging Marco's operations for months. She moved closer, pretending to admire a painting on the wall nearby, phone in her hand as if checking messages while she actually activated the voice recording app. "I don't know what to do anymore," the younger woman was saying, her voice cracking. "Angelo's gotten so paranoid. He thinks everyone's betraying him. Last week her voice dropped to a whisper. "He killed one of his own lieutenants. Sal. Just shot him in his office because he suspected betrayal." Vanessa gasped. "Maria, you need to get away from him." "You don't understand." Maria Calabrese, Sofia realized. Angelo's wife said desperately. "He has my sister. She owes him money from her ex-boyfriend's gambling debts. If I leave, if I say anything, he'll..." Her voice broke completely. Sofia's mind raced. Angelo Calabrese's wife, clearly desperate to escape, holding information about his operations, his paranoia, his internal violence. This was opportunity wrapped in tragedy. She approached their table carefully. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but are you okay?" Both women looked up, startled. Vanessa's face went white when she recognized Sofia. "Mrs. Romano," Vanessa said, her voice small. We were just..." "You look upset," Sofia said gently to Maria, ignoring Vanessa's discomfort. "I'm a nurse. Well, I was. Still am, really." Can I help? Maria wiped her eyes quickly. I'm fine. Just it's nothing. It's not nothing, Sofia said quietly, sitting down uninvited. She looked at Vanessa. Could you give us a moment? Vanessa fled without argument, clearly wanting no part of whatever was happening. Alone with Maria, Sofia lowered her voice. I know who you are, and I know who your husband is. I'm married to Marco Romano. Maria went pale. Please, I didn't mean I wasn't gossiping about. I'm not here to threaten you, Sofia interrupted. I'm here to offer help. You said your sister is in danger, that Angelo has leverage over you. I can fix that. Why would you help me? Maria asked, confusion and desperate hope warring on her face. Because I understand what it's like to feel trapped, Sofia said honestly, and because helping you helps my family. But more than that, because no woman should be held hostage by a violent man who thinks he owns her. Over the next hour, in a quiet corner of the Metropolitan Club, Maria Calabrese spilled everything. Angelo's paranoia had escalated over the past 6 months. He'd killed 3 of his own people, suspected of disloyalty, was planning a major move against the Romano operations, specifically targeting Marco personally, not just his businesses. He thinks if he kills Marco, the Romano family will fracture, Maria explained, her hands shaking, that the captains will fight over succession, and he can move in during the chaos. When? Sofia asked urgently. I don't know exactly. Soon, within the next few weeks. He's been meeting with some out-of-state contractors, professionals, hitmen. Sofia's blood ran cold. This wasn't business rivalry anymore. This was an assassination plot. Your sister, Sofia said. Where is she? Angelo has her working at one of his clubs, the Red Diamond in Queens. She can't leave. His men watch her constantly. Okay. Sofia's mind was already racing through possibilities. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to get your sister out tonight. By tomorrow, she'll be somewhere safe where Angelo can't touch her. In exchange, you're going to give me everything. Names of the hitmen, locations of meetings, Angelo's schedule, his security protocols, everything I need to protect my husband and destroy your husband's organization. If he finds out, he won't, Sofia said firmly. Because after tonight, you're disappearing too. New identity, new city, money to start over. My husband's family can arrange that. You'll both be safe. Maria stared at her, tears streaming down her face. You'd really do that? I would, Sofia confirmed. But I need your answer now. Yes or no? Are you willing to give me everything to save your sister and yourself? Yes, Maria whispered. God, yes. Please. Sofia pulled out her phone, texted Marco a coded message they'd established. Family. Emergency. Need home now. Come with me, Sofia said, standing. We don't have much time. By midnight, Maria's sister was in a safe house in New Jersey, guarded by Franco's most trusted men. Maria herself was in the Brooklyn brownstone, sitting across from Marco, Luca, and the assembled captains, telling them everything she knew about Angelo's operations. He's meeting the hitmen tomorrow night, Maria said, her voice hoarse from hours of talking. At his restaurant in Brooklyn, Il Corso on Atlantic Avenue. He thinks it's secure because it's his territory. Marco's face was stone. How many contractors? 3. Professionals from Philadelphia. They don't know what Marco looks like, so Angelo's providing photos, schedule, security details. Security details he doesn't actually have, Luca noted, because we changed the boss's routine weekly specifically to prevent this kind of thing. Angelo doesn't know that, Sofia said quietly. He thinks Marco is predictable because most bosses are. It's his weakness assuming everyone operates the way he does. Marco turned to her. You did good getting Maria out. This intelligence just saved my life. We're not done yet, Sofia said. Maria's given us everything we need to dismantle Angelo's organization completely. Not just stop the assassination attempt, but finish him permanently. Legally, financially, and reputationally. I'm listening, Marco said. Sofia pulled out her laptop, opened files she'd been compiling. Angelo's been sloppy. His paranoia made him violent, and violence leaves evidence. Maria has details on 3 murders in the past 6 months, including one of his own lieutenants. That's prosecutable if we get it to the right people. The feds, Dominic said. The feds, Sofia confirmed. But not just them. I've been cultivating a relationship with an investigative journalist at the New York Times. She's been looking for a way into organized crime corruption. Stories. If we feed her information about Angelo's operations, his clubs, his money laundering, his violence, she'll run with it. Public pressure, combined with federal investigation. That still leaves the immediate threat, Vincent pointed out. The hitmen meeting tomorrow night. We handle that directly, Marco said, his voice cold. But Sofia's right. This is an opportunity to destroy Angelo completely. Not just defend against an attack, but eliminate the Calabrese family as a threat forever. How? Tony asked. Marco smiled, and it was terrifying. We let Angelo think he's won. Let him believe his plan is working right up until the moment it collapses around him. Sofia, can your journalist friend be ready to publish a story within 48 hours if we provide her evidence? She's been ready for months, Sofia confirmed. She just needs the information. Good. Marco turned to Luca. Get our friends in the NYPD ready for coordinated raids on Angelo's operations. I want every club, every warehouse, every property he owns hit simultaneously. What about the federal investigation? Asked Anthony. That's mine, Sofia said. I have coffee scheduled with the federal prosecutor's wife tomorrow morning. I'll make sure certain information reaches her husband's desk by tomorrow afternoon. Anonymous tip, untraceable, with enough specific details that they'll have to act on it. The captains were staring at her with something like awe. Mrs. Romano, Dominic said slowly. You've been in this life for 3 months and you're orchestrating the complete destruction of a rival family using journalism, federal investigations, and coordinated law enforcement raids. That's brilliant, finished Vincent. That's absolutely brilliant. Marco pulled Sofia aside as the captains began coordinating logistics. You sure about this? Once we do this, once we take down the Calabrese family this publicly, there's no going back. Everyone will know the Romano family is not just powerful but strategic, willing to use legal channels to destroy enemies. Good, Sofia said firmly. Let them know. Let every rival family, every potential threat understand that we don't just use violence. We use intelligence, legal pressure, public exposure. We're more dangerous than they thought possible. Marco kissed her forehead. Have I mentioned lately that you're terrifying? Not in the last few hours, Sofia said with a slight smile. But I'll accept it now. The next 36 hours moved with military precision. Sofia met the prosecutor's wife for coffee, sympathetically listening to complaints about her husband's demanding work schedule, then casually mentioning she'd heard rumors about organized crime activity in Queens, something about a club called the Red Diamond. I only mention it because I saw some concerning injuries in the ER that seemed gang-related. The information was vague enough to seem like innocent concern, specific enough to trigger investigation. By that afternoon, a federal task force was reviewing intelligence about Angelo Calabrese's operations. The anonymous tip that arrived on the prosecutor's desk 2 hours later detailing money laundering, murder, and racketeering seemed like divine timing rather than coordinated attack. Sofia's journalist friend received an encrypted file containing decades of information about the Calabrese family operations. Photos, financial records, testimony from Maria and others who'd been victimized by Angelo's violence. Everything needed for a bombshell expose. This is Pulitzer-level material, the journalist texted Sofia. Where did you get this? Sources who want to remain anonymous, Sofia replied. Can you publish within 48 hours? For a story this big? I'll have it online tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, Marco's people prepared for the hitmen meeting. They'd intercepted Angelo's plans through Maria, knew exactly when, and where the assassination would supposedly occur. But instead of walking into Angelo's trap, Marco would spring one of his own. We're not going to kill anyone, Marco told his captains. That's the beautiful part. We're going to let Angelo hang himself with his own paranoia and violence. All we have to do is make sure the authorities are watching when he does. Franco had arranged for anonymous tips to reach both the FBI and NYPD about a planned mob hit occurring at Il Corso restaurant tomorrow night. The authorities would have surveillance in place, cameras recording, just waiting for something to happen. And something would happen, just not what Angelo expected. The night of the planned meeting, Sofia insisted on being present for the takedown. Absolutely not, Marco said firmly. This is dangerous. If something goes wrong, then I want to be there. Sofia interrupted. I set this in motion. I turned Maria. I deserve to see it through. Sofia, I'm not asking permission, she said, her voice steel. I'm your partner, Marco. Fully, That means I'm present for this. They argued for 20 minutes before Marco finally gave in, extracting promises that she'd stay in the surveillance van with Franco, far from any potential violence. Il Corso restaurant sat on a quiet block in Brooklyn, its windows glowing warm in the February cold. From the surveillance van half a block away, Sofia watched through cameras that Franco's team had planted earlier. Angelo Calabrese arrived at 9 p.m., accompanied by 4 bodyguards. He looked stressed, paranoid, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. Inside the private dining room, 3 men waited the hitmen from Philadelphia. "Audio's clear," Franco said, adjusting equipment. "We're recording everything." Sofia leaned forward, watching the screens. This was it. The moment months of work culminated. Angelo sat down heavily, gestured for his bodyguards to wait outside the private room. "You have the information?" The lead hitman, a cold-eyed man in his 50s, slid a folder across the table. "Target schedule, security protocols, best opportunities for approach. Your intelligence was thorough." "Good." Angelo opened the folder, studied the contents. "When can you move?" 72 hours. We'll make it look random. A robbery gone wrong. Nobody traces it back to you." "Perfect." Angelo smiled, and it was ugly. "Marco Romano has been a thorn in my side for too long. With him gone, his family fractures. I take the port operations, the union contacts, everything he's built. Finally, the Calabrese family gets what it deserves." "That's a confession," Sofia breathed. "Conspiracy to commit murder. The feds have enough to prosecute." But they weren't done, because at that moment the FBI burst through Il Corso's doors. "Federal agents, nobody move." Angelo's face went white as agents swarmed the restaurant. The hitmen were on the ground in seconds, hands behind their backs. Angelo tried to run, but agents blocked every exit. "Angelo Calabrese, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, money laundering." The list of charges went on and on. From the surveillance van, Sofia watched Angelo realize he'd been set up, watched his organization collapse in real time as coordinated raids hit every Calabrese property simultaneously. "It's done," Franco said quietly. "The Calabrese family is finished." Sofia felt no satisfaction, just relief. Relief that Marco was safe, that the threat was eliminated, that her plan had worked. Marco climbed into the surveillance van, pulled Sofia into a fierce hug. "You did it. You actually did it." "We did it," Sofia corrected. "All of us." The New York Times article dropped the next morning, front page, above the fold. Inside the Calabrese crime family, violence, corruption, and federal indictments. The story detailed everything. Angelo's murders, his money laundering, operations, his planned assassination of a rival mob boss, the FBI's coordinated takedown. It cited anonymous sources, included photos and documents, painted a picture of a crime family imploding under its own violence and paranoia. By noon, every news outlet in the country was running the story. Angelo Calabrese became the face of organized crime's brutality and stupidity. And notably, absent from the article, any mention of the Romano family. Sofia had made sure the journalist understood. The story was about the Calabreses, not their rivals. The Romano family remained in the shadows where they preferred to be, their role in Angelo's downfall invisible to everyone except those who needed to know. "You've changed the game," Luca told Sofia during the victory celebration at the brownstone that evening. "Other families are going to study what happened here. How you used legal channels, journalism, intelligence gathering to destroy an enemy without firing a single shot." "Good," Sofia said. "Let them study it. Let them understand that violence isn't the only path to power." Maria Calabrese and her sister had already disappeared, new identities provided by Marco's connections, relocated to a city where Angelo's remaining loyalists would never find them. Maria had sent a single text to Sofia before going dark. "Thank you for giving me my life back." Sofia deleted the message immediately, but kept the gratitude warm in her chest. 3 months later, spring arrived in New York with a vengeance-warm sun, blooming trees, the city shaking off winter's grip. Sofia stood in the Brooklyn brownstone's backyard, watching Marco's nieces and nephews play while his extended family gathered for Sunday dinner. This was the legitimate side of the Romano family. Cousins who ran pizza, restaurants, and construction companies, aunts who taught school, uncles who worked for the city. They knew what Marco did generally, but didn't ask questions and weren't involved in operations. They'd avasassis, accepted Sofia immediately. Not because of her role in the business, which they didn't know about, but because Marco loved her, and she treated them with genuine warmth. You're good for him. Marco's Aunt Teresa said, appearing beside Sofia with a glass of wine. I haven't seen my nephew this happy since his parents died. You brought light back into his life. He brought purpose into mine, Sofia said honestly. They watched the children play, the adults laugh, the normal family chaos that had nothing to do with crime or power or danger. This was why Marco did what he did to protect this, to ensure his family thrived, to maintain the foundation that 3 generations had built. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.